I never expected it to happen like this. If you had asked me a year ago where my life was heading, I would have said I had it all figured out. A quiet house in a quiet neighborhood, a job I didn't love but tolerated, a wife who was, well, my wife. I thought that was enough. But sometimes, life has a way of showing you how little you know. I'm sure you're wondering what led to me writing this, asking strangers on Reddit to listen to my story. How does a guy who thought he had everything end up here, telling a story about betrayal, pride, and loss? Well, I guess it all starts with one sentence, a sentence that shattered everything I thought I knew. My God, you have no pride. I didn't know how to respond. The words didn't even register at first. They just hung in the air, heavy, suffocating. My wife, Clara, had never spoken to me like that before. Clara, the woman I married. The woman I had grown to depend on, to trust. The one who had been my best friend for the past 6 years. We'd built our lives together, and I thought that meant something. But apparently, I was wrong. It wasn't just a passing comment. It wasn't a casual remark made in frustration. No, Clara said it with finality, like she had been holding on to that thought for years, waiting for the right moment to let it out. And when she did, it hit me like a punch in the gut. I had no pride. I didn't even know what to make of it. The more I thought about it, the more it gnawed at me. Pride? Was she talking about the fact that I didn't yell at the barista when they messed up my coffee order? Or maybe because I never argued when things didn't go the way I wanted? Was that pride? Was I too passive? Too accepting of whatever life threw my way? The thing was, I hadn't seen it coming. It wasn't like we were having a fight. There was no disagreement that sparked it. The day had started off like any other. I had gone to work, got home, greeted Clara, and we had dinner. She had even smiled at me that evening. But somewhere between the normal conversation we had over the sink, you know, the kind of chat about nothing and everything, she casually dropped that bomb. And then she left. She just walked out of the door, without another word. And I sat there, staring at the spot where she had stood, the weight of her words hanging over me. What happened next is the part that makes me sick to think about, because I never thought I'd find myself doing it. I didn't trust Clara anymore. It wasn't just the words. It was the way she said them. The tone of her voice was almost disappointed. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it felt like she had already made up her mind about me. And I couldn't let that stand. So I did what any man would do when his world is turned upside down and shattered. I started digging. I'd never been the jealous type. I never felt the need to invade her privacy. But I was different now. Her words had awakened something inside me. Something primal. I had to know what was happening. I had to know if there was more to it. I couldn't go on living in this limbo, questioning everything. It started small. Her phone. I didn't go through it immediately. At first, I thought, maybe I'm just being paranoid. Maybe it's nothing. But then I noticed the subtle signs, the late nights, the meetings she claimed she was going to. The sudden need for privacy, always turning her phone face down when I walked by. The way she laughed at her messages, then quickly hid the screen when I looked at her. You know the feeling, right? When something just doesn't sit right. That nagging little voice telling you to look closer? One evening, after I heard her phone buzz for the third time in 10 minutes, I finally gave in. I reached for her phone. The screen lit up with a text message preview. The name didn't mean anything to me. Can't wait to see you tomorrow, beautiful. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I knew then that everything I thought I knew was a lie. But it wasn't just that message. It was the following ones. The ones that were so casual, so intimate, so familiar. Clara wasn't just chatting with someone. She was flirting. I felt like I was losing control, like the ground beneath me was slipping away. But even in the midst of my shock and anger, there was something inside me that knew this wasn't the end of it. This wasn't just about a few texts or a late night out. It was about something deeper, something that went beyond infidelity. This was about pride. And she was right. I didn't have any. I didn't stand up for myself. I didn't ask questions. I didn't challenge her. I had accepted the life I had, the life she seemed to want, not the one I had envisioned for myself. And now, I was paying the price. But I wasn't going to just sit there and let her walk all over me. I wasn't going to be the guy who let his wife treat him like this, let her tear apart the foundation we had built together. I wasn't going to let her destroy my pride without a fight. And that's when I realized she was wrong. I did have pride. It just took me a while to find it. The next part of the story is what I did to prove her wrong. In the most final, irreversible way. I'm not proud of it, but I did it. I did it for me. The following days were an agonizing blur. I didn't know how to look at Clara anymore, and I could tell she felt the same way. There was this coldness between us, a space that seemed to widen with each passing minute. She acted as though nothing had changed. She went about her usual routine, cooking dinner, checking her emails, scrolling through her phone. But I knew something was wrong. The tension in the house was unbearable, but neither of us said a word. It was like we were both waiting for the other to make the first move. But I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't just sit back and pretend that everything was fine. The worst part? It wasn't even the cheating. It was the realization that Clara had stopped seeing me as the man I once was. She had reduced me to a shadow of myself, a passive observer in my own life. That's when I knew I had to take control, not just of the situation, but of my own dignity. I began thinking about what Clara had said, that I had no pride. I had always been the easygoing guy, the one who let things slide, who avoided confrontation because it felt easier to let her have her way. But now I was fed up. I wasn't going to let her dictate who I was anymore. One evening, after she had gone to bed, I stayed up in the living room. My mind was racing. I had already seen the texts, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more I wasn't seeing. I needed to know the full extent of the betrayal. I had to confront her with the truth, but I needed proof. Undeniable proof, something that would make her see how wrong she was about me. The decision wasn't easy. I'd never thought I would go this far, but desperation does strange things to a person. I decided to do something I should have done a long time ago. I checked her computer. Clara's laptop had always been open on the kitchen counter, usually left untouched, a silent companion in her late-night work sessions. But that night, something urged me to open it. I hesitated for a moment, but then I opened the laptop, praying that I wasn't about to make the worst mistake of my life. Her password was simple, a birthday, one I had memorized long ago. Once I was inside, I found what I was looking for almost immediately. Emails. Hundreds of them. Most of them were work-related, but buried in between the mundane messages were intimate exchanges, detailed, passionate, and disturbingly candid. Clara had been having an affair with someone from her office, a man named Derek. The messages were filled with terms of endearment, plans to meet up, and references to moments that sounded far too personal. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I read through them. I wasn't just reading about a betrayal. I was reading about a life I had no part in. It wasn't just the affair that shook me to my core. It was the realization that Clara had hidden this from me for so long, that she had been living a double life without a second thought. The man I had thought I knew, my wife, the woman I had shared my life with, was no longer the person I thought she was. And to make matters worse, she had the audacity to tell me I had no pride, as if I was the one who had failed this marriage. I sat there, frozen, unable to process what I had just uncovered. This wasn't just about a lack of pride. This was about respect, or, more accurately, the complete lack of it. Clara had shown me none, and I had allowed it to happen. I had let myself shrink, hoping that if I just kept my head down, things would get better. But they hadn't, and they never would. Not unless I did something about it. I closed the laptop with shaking hands. The reality of what I had to do hit me hard. The decision was clear, but the road ahead was anything but easy. But there was no going back now. If I was going to prove Clara wrong, if I was going to show her that I had more pride than she'd ever realized, it had to be done. I couldn't just leave things as they were. I couldn't let this go. The next morning, Clara woke up as if nothing had happened. She made her coffee, fixed her usual breakfast, and went about her morning routine. I sat at the table, silently watching her, knowing that I was about to turn our lives upside down. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to destroy everything we had, but I couldn't keep living a lie. Finally, I spoke. Clara, we need to talk. She froze, the spoon in her hand pausing midair. She glanced at me, her face devoid of emotion. About what? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. About you and Derek. Her eyes widened, just for a moment, but she quickly recovered, her expression shifting to one of indifference. What are you talking about? I slid the laptop across the table, the screen displaying the damning emails. I've seen everything, Clara. The emails, the texts. You've been lying to me. To both of us. Her face went pale, but she didn't say anything. She just stared at the screen, then back at me, as if she were searching for some way out. But there was no escape. Not anymore. You know what the worst part is? I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and hurt. "You told me I had no pride. You said I was weak, that I let you walk all over me. But the truth is, I let you do this. I let you treat me like this. I let you destroy everything we built together. And now I'm done." Clara opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. There was nothing she could say that would change what had happened. The damage was done. I stood up from the table, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm done, Clara. I'm done with you, with this life, with everything that we've become. You've made your choice. Now, it's time for me to make mine." With that, I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her alone in the silence of her lies. But this wasn't the end of the story. Not by a long shot. What I did next was something I never thought I'd be capable of, but in that moment, it felt like the only way to truly reclaim my pride. The silence in the house was deafening after I walked away from Clara. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there, not with her sitting at the table, pretending everything was fine, acting as though she hadn't just shredded our entire life. I needed air. I needed space. I walked around the block, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The air felt colder than usual, the world around me blurring into something distant and unimportant. What had I just done? Confronted her? Was that all I was going to do? Just lay it all out on the table and walk away? There had to be more. There had to be a way to end this for good, to prove to myself, and to her, that I wasn't the weak man she thought I was. I found myself standing in front of a bar I used to go to with friends. It felt strange, almost like a different lifetime, but I went inside anyway. I ordered a drink, just to quiet the noise in my head. The bartender, a guy named Matt who knew me from a few years back, slid a glass in front of me without asking questions. He didn't need to. I sat there, staring at the amber liquid swirling in my glass, letting the truth of my situation sink in. Clara, the woman I had shared everything with, had completely broken me. But I wasn't going to let her break my spirit. That was the moment I realized something. I wasn't just fighting to reclaim my pride. I was fighting for my self-worth. And that meant doing what needed to be done, no matter how hard it was. I went home late that night. Clara was still there, sitting in silence, her face hidden behind the glow of her phone screen. She didn't acknowledge me. I didn't acknowledge her. We were two strangers in the same house, and it felt like we had been for a long time. But I had a plan now. I wasn't just going to walk away and let her win. I wasn't going to let her think she could tear me down and walk away without consequence. I knew what I had to do, but I had to do it in a way that would shake her, that would make her realize what she had lost. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands steady for the first time in days. Clara glanced up at me, eyes tired, trying to act like nothing had changed. But we both knew better. "I've made a decision," I said, keeping my voice calm, even. "I'm leaving. And I'm taking everything. The house. The car. Everything we've built together, it's mine now. You can have what's left." Clara didn't say anything at first. Her eyes flickered with disbelief, but she didn't ask me why. She didn't beg me to stay. There was no apology. Nothing. It was like she had already moved on in her mind, as though I had ceased to matter the moment she stepped out of line. I stood up and began packing my things. It wasn't dramatic or angry. I wasn't shouting or throwing things. I was simply taking what was mine. My clothes, my books, the things I had worked for, the things I had invested in. I wasn't just leaving the house. I was leaving the man I used to be behind. I could feel Clara's eyes on me, but I didn't look back. I wasn't going to engage with her. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge. This was about me reclaiming my life. By the time I was done packing, it was late. Too late for words to change anything. Clara hadn't moved from the table. She hadn't tried to stop me, and that told me everything I needed to know. She had already written me off. I walked to the door, but before I left, I turned to her one last time. "You were right about one thing," I said, my voice steady, finally at peace with what I had to do. "I do have pride, and now, I'm finally going to live like it." With that, I walked out. I left behind everything I thought I knew about love, about marriage, and about myself. But I also walked out with something I hadn't had in a long time, my dignity. The next day, I took the first step in rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy. I didn't have a grand plan. But I knew I couldn't keep living in the shadow of a lie. I wasn't going to be the man who let betrayal define him. I was going to be the man who took back control, not just for Clara, but for me. And I would prove her wrong in the most final way possible. The first few days after I left were a blur. I didn't know what I was doing or where I was going, but I knew I couldn't go back. Not to her. Not to that life. I rented a small apartment in a part of town I'd never been to, one where no one knew me, where I could be just a guy starting over. I filled the apartment with only the essentials: clothes, a bed, a few pieces of furniture. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The loneliness hit harder than I expected. At first, it was liberating. No Clara, no constant questioning of my pride, no pretending everything was okay when I knew it wasn't. But after a few days, the silence became suffocating. I didn't have the answers I was looking for. I didn't know if I was supposed to feel relieved or regretful. What I did know was that I couldn't keep running. I kept thinking about the way Clara had looked at me the night I left. There was no begging, no guilt, just a cold acceptance that maybe I wasn't the man she wanted anymore. That hurt more than anything. To be replaced so easily. To have given everything and then been thrown aside like it meant nothing. But I wasn't going to wallow in that. Not anymore. One night, as I sat in my new place, drinking a beer and flipping through a magazine, my phone buzzed. I knew it was Clara before I even looked. It had been a few days since I left, and I had avoided all her calls and messages. But something about this one felt different. I picked up the phone. "Arthur, we need to talk." I read the message again. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know what I expected from Clara, but this wasn't it. She wanted to talk? After everything? After she had betrayed me and made me feel like I was nothing? I stared at the screen for a long time, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue with my life and never look back. But the other part of me, the one that had loved her so deeply for so many years, wanted closure. I needed to hear it from her. I texted back. "When and where?" She didn't reply immediately, but about an hour later, I received another message. "Come to the park. I'll be waiting." The park? Of all places. It was where we had first met, years ago, where we'd spent our first summer together, laughing, talking, dreaming about a future that now seemed so distant. I grabbed my jacket and left the apartment. The walk to the park felt surreal, like I was moving through a different version of my life. Everything had changed, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was waiting for me. When I arrived, I saw her sitting on the same bench where we had shared so many conversations before. She was looking down at the ground, her shoulders slumped. She didn't see me at first, so I stood there for a moment, watching her. She looked different. More fragile, maybe. But then, what did I expect? I wasn't the only one who had been hurt. I cleared my throat, and she looked up, her eyes meeting mine. There was a moment of silence before she spoke. "Arthur, I'm sorry." I had expected anger. I had expected her to blame me, to say it was my fault somehow. But no, she was apologizing. For the first time, she seemed genuinely remorseful. "I never meant to hurt you," she continued, her voice shaky. "I don't know what happened to us. I don't know how I let it get this far." I took a deep breath. I wanted to say so many things, but all I could manage was one question. Why? She hesitated, looking away, then back at me. "I don't know. I got lost. I thought I could find something in someone else. I thought it would fix whatever was broken inside me. But it didn't. It just made everything worse." I stared at her, trying to process her words. Part of me wanted to forgive her. The part of me that had spent years loving her. The part of me that still missed her. But another part, the part that had walked away and found strength in leaving, knew that this wasn't enough. "I can't go back, Clara," I said quietly, my voice steady. "Not after everything. Not after what you've done." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I understand," she whispered. The truth was, I wasn't angry at Clara anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just done. I had learned something about myself in the days since I left. I had learned that I was capable of more than I thought. I had been letting her dictate my life for so long that I didn't even realize it. But when I walked away, when I finally took control of my own fate, I realized something important. I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. I turned to leave, and as I walked away, I heard her call my name softly. "Arthur," she said, her voice breaking. "I'll always love you." I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I had loved her too, but I had loved myself more. And that was the final truth I had to accept. As I left the park, the weight I had been carrying for so long seemed to lift. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't the same man I was when I walked into that house. I had my pride back, and that was all that mattered. I didn't hear from Clara after that night at the park. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I wanted to. Part of me still longed for some kind of reconciliation, but another part of me knew that chapter was closed. The truth was, the more I reflected on it, the clearer it became. I had been suffocating in that relationship for too long. Weeks passed, and I focused on myself. I started running in the mornings, something I'd never had time for before. I picked up old hobbies I'd abandoned, and for the first time in years, I started feeling alive again. But there was one thing I couldn't shake. The question that still haunted me: what was I really running from? One night, as I sat in my small apartment, sipping on a beer, my phone buzzed again. I knew who it was, even before I looked. It was Clara. I hesitated for a moment, staring at the screen, weighing my options. Should I answer? Should I even entertain this anymore? Part of me wanted to leave the past in the past, but another part of me felt like there was something unfinished, something I needed to know. I picked up the phone. Arthur. Clara's voice was soft, almost broken. Can we meet? I didn't say anything at first. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face her again. But then, as her voice cracked through the silence, I realized that this wasn't about her anymore. It was about me, about my need for closure, my need for finality. Where? I finally asked. Same place. The park, she replied. I couldn't stop myself. I agreed. The park again. It felt strange, almost like we were trapped in a loop. But this time, I knew things were different. I wasn't the same man who walked into that park weeks ago. When I arrived, she was already sitting on the same bench. But this time, she wasn't looking at the ground. She was looking straight ahead, almost as though she was waiting for something to happen. Maybe she was waiting for me to walk away, or maybe she was waiting for me to ask her to come back. But neither of those things was going to happen. I sat down next to her, keeping a little distance between us. There was no small talk this time. No casual greetings. Just silence. Arthur, she started after a long pause, her voice thick with emotion. I've been thinking. A lot. About everything. And I need to tell you something. I turned to her, waiting for her to continue. But I knew whatever she said wouldn't change anything. She could apologize 1,000 times, and it wouldn't change the fact that she had broken something that couldn't be fixed. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, her voice shaking. I know I did, and I regret it. But what I didn't realize, until now, is how much I've lost. I lost you. I lost us. And I don't think I can ever get that back. There it was, the truth, spilling out of her like a confession. But the words felt hollow to me now. You should have thought about that before, I replied, my voice firm. Before you made your choices. Before you decided that I wasn't enough. She flinched, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered what she had done, what she had put me through. The pain of betrayal wasn't something I could just erase with a few words. I know, she whispered. I know. We sat there for a few minutes, the weight of everything between us, unspoken. Finally, I stood up, the finality of it hitting me. This was it. Clara, I don't know what you want from me. You've hurt me in ways I can't even explain, but I'm done now. You made your choices, and I made mine. I looked at her one last time, her face tear-streaked and desperate. I could see the pain in her eyes, but it no longer had the power to move me. I wish you the best, I said coldly, walking away. As I left the park, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was free. Clara had lost me, not just as a husband, but as a person. And in the end, that was the final proof that I had regained my pride. The days after that final meeting with Clara were the strangest I had ever experienced. On the one hand, I felt liberated, like a weight had been lifted from my chest. But on the other hand, I found myself confronted with something I hadn't anticipated: loneliness. I hadn't been truly alone in years. And for the first time, I was beginning to realize just how much of myself I had lost in the process of holding on to someone who had long since let go of me. But that's how it goes, isn't it? You get so caught up in someone else's needs, someone else's desires, that you forget about your own. It had taken me months, no, years, to realize that I had spent more time trying to fix Clara, trying to be what she needed, than I had trying to be the man I wanted to be. And now, there I was, trying to figure out what that man even looked like. I threw myself into my work, but even that didn't feel the same. It was as though everything I touched had a shadow of the past attached to it. Clara's absence, her betrayal, lingered in every quiet moment. But then, something happened that I didn't expect. I started to reconnect with old friends. Not the acquaintances who had dropped out of my life when Clara and I became a package deal, but the people I had pushed away in favor of my marriage. People who knew me before I became her husband, before I became someone else's idea of who I should be. One evening, while meeting with an old college buddy, I said something I hadn't even realized I was feeling. I'm finally starting to remember who I was before all this. He looked at me, almost as if he hadn't understood the depth of what I was saying. And who is that guy, Arthur? I paused. It was a question I hadn't asked myself in years. Who was I really? I'd been so wrapped up in Clara's world, in our world, that I had forgotten the man I was before all that. The guy who wasn't afraid to make mistakes, the guy who wasn't scared of disappointing people, the guy who didn't need to be perfect. But as I thought about it more, I realized something else. Clara hadn't just taken a piece of me with her. She had taken my ability to trust myself. My confidence had been chipped away, piece by piece, until all that was left was doubt. I was standing at a crossroads, unsure whether to go back to the life I had with her or keep moving forward into the unknown. The decision was harder than I had expected, but I knew I couldn't keep living in the past. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. Clara called me again. This time, it wasn't a message, it wasn't a meeting request. She just called. Arthur, I need to tell you something. Something important. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready for this. But, in the end, I picked up the phone. What is it? I asked, trying to sound as unaffected as possible. I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking. I know I don't deserve this, but I've realized something. I never should have let you go. I thought I could live without you, but I was wrong. I was selfish, and now I see what I've lost. And I don't know if I can ever fix it, but I want to try. Please. I sat there in silence, her words hanging in the air. For the first time, Clara sounded vulnerable, genuine. She wasn't asking for forgiveness, not yet anyway. But she was offering something more important. She was admitting that she had been wrong. For so long, I had wanted her to say those words, to admit she had made a mistake, but now, I wasn't sure it mattered anymore. The truth was, I didn't know if I could go back to her. I didn't know if I could ever trust her the way I used to. The thought of opening that door again filled me with dread. It wasn't the same love I had felt before. It wasn't the same trust. But there was something else, something I couldn't ignore. In that moment, I realized that I didn't need her to fix me. I didn't need her to validate my worth. I had already done that for myself. I had rebuilt my life, piece by piece, and I wasn't going to let her tear it down again. Clara, I said softly, my voice steady but firm. I'm not who I was when we were together. I've changed. I've moved on. And I think it's time you do the same. Her silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could hear the pain in her breath, the unspoken words she wanted to say, but I didn't give her the chance to argue. I wish you the best, Clara. I really do, I said. But I can't go back. I hung up the phone, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had truly let go. There were no regrets, no anger, just a quiet acceptance of what had happened and what I had become in the process. I had found myself again. And this time, no one was going to take that from me. Weeks passed after that phone call, and life seemed to settle into a new rhythm. I kept moving forward, refusing to look back. My days were filled with small victories, getting back into my old hobbies, building new routines, meeting people I hadn't seen in years. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living for myself. But despite all the progress, the past still crept up on me at unexpected moments. The quiet nights when I was alone in my apartment, the random reminders of Clara, a song we used to listen to, an old photo I found buried in a drawer. I hated that part of me still missed her, that I still felt the sting of betrayal. One evening, as I was walking home from a bar, a figure stepped out in front of me. For a split second, I thought I was imagining it, but then the familiar voice cut through the air. Arthur. It was Clara. I froze, unsure of what to say, what to feel. It had been a while since we'd last spoken, and I hadn't expected to see her like this, standing in front of me on the sidewalk, looking just as lost as the last time I saw her. I didn't think I'd see you again, I said, my voice steady. But inside, my heart was pounding. I know, she said, looking down at the ground. I've been trying to respect your space, but I couldn't keep running from this. There was an awkward silence between us, and I had no idea how to navigate it. The past was never far behind, and now, she was here, forcing me to confront it all over again. I've been thinking a lot, she continued, her voice low, about everything, about us, and about the person I became. And I've come to realize something. I didn't interrupt. I didn't know if I wanted to hear it, but part of me needed to. I've hurt you, she said, her eyes meeting mine. More than you'll ever know. And I don't think I can undo that. But I need you to know I'm not the person I was before. I'm trying to be better for myself. For you. If I could take back everything I did, I would. Her words were genuine, and I could see the vulnerability in her eyes. It wasn't the same woman who had betrayed me. This was someone different, someone trying to rebuild themselves. But as much as I wanted to believe her, I couldn't. I'd been down that road before, and the pain of betrayal still stung too much. Clara, I said, the weight of the moment settling in. You can't fix this. You can't fix what's been broken. And I can't keep waiting for you to change. She looked like I had slapped her, but I wasn't sorry for what I'd said. I wasn't the same person who would bend and break just to keep someone in my life. I had learned the hard way that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. I've learned a lot from you, Clara, I continued. But the most important lesson is that I can't lose myself in someone else's mistakes. I can't sacrifice who I am just to make someone else feel whole. She stepped back, tears welling in her eyes. But I couldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I don't think we'll ever be the same, I said, my voice steady but firm. And maybe that's a good thing. For a moment, it felt like everything hung in the balance, like we could go back, or maybe even find a way forward. But then I realized that I was already moving forward. Without her, I need to go, I said, turning and walking away without looking back. As I walked down the street, I felt something inside me shift. It wasn't relief. It wasn't anger. It was something else entirely, something I hadn't felt in years, freedom. I didn't need Clara to complete me. I had always been whole. And that was the moment I knew I had truly reclaimed myself. Time has a way of healing wounds, but only if you let it. For the next few months, life began to fall into place in ways I never expected. I threw myself into my work, rediscovered passions I had forgotten, and even started traveling again. I saw the world in a way I hadn't before, without the weight of Clara's betrayal holding me down. There were still moments when I thought of her, of what we had, but those thoughts faded with time. The anger, the bitterness, it all started to dissolve into something far more powerful, peace. One afternoon, while I was working at a cafe, I got a text from an old friend. It was an innocent enough message, just checking in to see how I was doing. But what he told me next made my stomach drop. Hey man, have you heard? Clara's been having some problems at work. Word around town is she's been let go. Not sure what happened, but it's all over the office. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me felt nothing. I had walked away from her, and in doing so, I had walked away from any attachment to her fate. But another part of me felt something, almost like justice. After everything she had done to me, after the way she treated me, it almost felt like the universe was balancing the scales. It wasn't revenge, it was just life. The consequences of her actions were finally catching up to her. But the final twist came when I got a call a few days later. It was Clara. My heart raced for a moment, but I didn't feel the dread I once had. I felt calm. Arthur, she said, her voice shaky. I need to talk to you. It's about everything. I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure what she wanted or why she was calling me now. After everything that had happened, after I had closed that door so decisively, why was she reaching out? I lost my job, she continued, her voice quieter. And I know it's my fault. I screwed up, Arthur. I know that. But I don't know who else to turn to. I feel like everything is falling apart, and I'm scared. I could hear the desperation in her voice, the cracks of her carefully constructed walls. It wasn't the Clara I once knew, but in a way, it was a reminder of the person she had been, broken, fragile, needing someone to save her. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had saved myself, and that was enough. Clara, I said, my voice steady. I'm sorry you're going through this. But I can't help you. Not anymore. She was silent for a long moment. You're really done with me, aren't you? Yes, I said firmly. I'm done, and I think that's the best thing for both of us. I hung up the phone, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel any guilt. No regret. I had done the right thing. I had walked away when I needed to, and now I was free. Months later, I found out that Clara had left town, taken a new job in a different city. I never heard from her again. The man I had been was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who knew his worth. As for Clara, life had a way of catching up with her. The mistakes she had made, the choices she had taken for granted, eventually led to her downfall. But that was her journey to walk, not mine. I had reclaimed my pride. I had taken back control. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. Now, I live my life without looking over my shoulder. I've learned to trust myself again, to move forward with my head held high. And every now and then, I think back to those dark days, the betrayal, the heartache, and I realize just how far I've come. The person I was before Clara, the one who had let himself shrink for someone else's comfort, is long gone. And I've never been prouder of the man I am now. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply walking away and letting the universe take care of the rest. And that's exactly what happened. The end.